Former anti-vaxxers. What caused you to change your mind? I'll give you an historical one. In 1736 I lost one of my sons. A fine boy of 4 years old. By the smallpox. Taken in the common way. I long regretted bitterly. And still regret that I had not given it to him by inoculation. This I mention for the sake of parents who omit that operation. On the supposition that they should never forgive themselves if a child died under it. My example showing that the regret may be the same either way and that. Therefore, the safer should be chosen. Benjamin Franklin. I don't really know why I didn't like the idea of vaccines, but I didn't until my girlfriend had gotten pregnant and then I stepped on a rusty nail. Like the only way to stop tetanus is the vaccine. Edit. My girlfriend was pregnant and asked what I would do if my daughter picked up tetanus after I told her I stepped on rusty nail, was unaware how tetanus or really any vaccines work, if that gives an insight to anti-vaxxers. Not all, but yeah. My mum told me last week when we were talking about a COVID-19 vaccine that she nearly didn't have my brother and I vaccinated. I was shocked, because she was a nurse for years and years. And she now stresses the importance of getting our yearly flu vaccinations and pushes my needle-phobic dad to get his. Basically, when she was doing her nurse training back in the early 70s, she did a few weeks on the only ward in the country at the time for people with profound and multiple disabilities, PMLD. The majority were born with PMLD or had them as a result of oxygen deprivation at birth, but she was told that a handful of them developed them following vaccine injury. Not sure if this is a medically accepted term, but those are the words she used. From a single bad batch of vaccines for measles and rubella. I think. By the time my brother and I were born in 1988 and 1990, she was still affected by what she'd seen back in the 70s, and although she'd seen the progress in vaccinations and there were no more reports of these bad batches of vaccines, she didn't allow them to give us our first vaccine doses on time. It wasn't until my aunt, also a trained nurse, showed her the latest stats and research about vaccines that she reluctantly decided to have us vaccinated. I was 1 year old at the time and scheduled for the MMR jab. It was the Mr. Vaccine that she was told caused these vaccine injuries, and she was very reluctant to go ahead with it, but ultimately agreed that both my brother, 2.5 at the time, needed to catch up on all our vaccines. She didn't take us to get them. She sent my dad instead. Again, needle phobic. And he and I apparently cried the whole time. She told me that she'd glad she decided for us to get the vaccines as we've been mostly healthy since then, and if it hadn't been for our aunt we might not have ever been vaccinated. I was a teenager, used to believe that if I got sick, my immune system would handle it and make me stronger. Like most youth, I believed I was invulnerable. I figured thousands of years of ancestors had survived without vaccines. And so could I. It was years before I realized that before vaccines, people didn't just heal the viruses away. Most of them died or were crippled by illness their whole lives. Hard to say. But, reading, honestly, I was on the elderberry, colloidal silver, whatever natural bullshit flavor of the week in my late teens, early 20s. Could dig up some obscure study from the 1960s to support it. Well, flu shots aren't 100% effective. What's the point? Have you seen all the people who get sick from it? Etc. Etc. Simply put, I had bad advice from some of my father's vitamin shop. Libertarian. Naturopath. Whatever friends. In grad school I took more statistics classes. Keep reading about data analysis. Started to learn what significant sample sizes meant. Common logical and statistical fallacies and surprise. Most anti-science nonsense doesn't hold up empirically at all. There's just no data to support it. And requires torturing of statistics and misrepresentation to defend their case. Luckily I don't have some epic story of a family member dying from a preventable disease. But it's still embarrassing to think back how arrogantly I was convinced I was more clever than the actual doctors and scientists. My now wife was an anti-vaxxer. I generally go with what she says most of the time because I cannot be bothered to argue. However, when we were discussing getting married and having kids I was surprised at how strongly I felt about. I was prepared to walk away from the love of my life rather than not vaccinate. I gave all of the reasons. I'm from a third world country and she is European. I have seen too much shit from a lack of vaccination program to sit on the fence on this. She came around. When our first was born he was quite ill. I don't think we were in danger of losing him, but just that tiny bit of danger reiterated the point of protecting them and others from illnesses. My wife is now more on top of the vaccination dates for our kids than I am. A friend of hers had a baby recently and expressed some anti-vaccination sentiments. My wife calmly told her that not only would she be putting her own kids in danger but that she would be weaponizing her child against others. Quite a turnaround. Kind of boring. But I have a whackjob grandmother who believes in all the pseudoscience health BS. Crystal healing. Electromagnetic communications cause cancer. Vaccines are bad. Eat apricot pits to cure cancer. The whole 9 miles. When I was a kid she tried to teach me all of this stuff like it was gospel. And I believed her because I was a kid, and why would my grandmom be wrong about something? Unfortunately for her, the minute I turned like 7, I got a huge hyperfixation on biology and quickly learned that all the stuff she spouted was utter BS. I'm autistic. And I was like the stereotypical autistic kid where they just know a fuckton about one particular subject and devour any kind of learning material related to it they can get their hands on. I'm actually still like that. Except now I can get a degree for it. It was not hard for me to realize that none of the things she believed made any sense. Even as a kid. I met my Mill, who is the ultimate anti-vaxxer, and realized how fucking crazy she sounds, and I didn't want to end up like that. Also, I have a baby daughter who I would like to live a long healthy life. My ex-husband was a very controlling person and did not want our kids to get vaccines. I was always so scared knowing my kids had no protection. One day one of our kids scraped themselves on a fence and the school called me. I snapped and took them straight to an urgent care for a tetanus shot and just started secretly getting all my kids vaccines. We eventually divorced and now all my kids are fully caught up. I was a stereotypical, naturalistic vegan type. Didn't believe in essential oils or crystal healing or anything. Just believed, mistakenly, that you couldn't beat nature and that vaccines were messing around with my baby's natural immunity growth. I believed they were an unnecessary risk. I knew my decision was controversial, so I kept it quiet. I wouldn't have been out campaigning or splashing it all over social media. It was a private decision. I held off until he was 2. We don't routinely vaccinate for chickenpox here in the UK, so he got it, which is expected. However, he got a bacterial infection on top and had to spend a night in hospital. Nothing too traumatic, but I realized I didn't have the balls to play nature v. medicine anymore. I read an article about a mom who changed her view on vaccinations because of how radical the anti-vax groups were. A lot of them were anti-gay, anti-abortion, and so crazy about all of it. Pro the dumbest shit, like oils. Pushed the agendas of things that were obviously false. It made her step back and change her entire outlook on the anti-vax movement. I wish I could find this article. It was pretty interesting. Probably on Facebook. But she made great points against them. Not me. But my cousin. She was extremely anti-vax for most of her life. And she refused to vaccinate her kids when they were born. Her second baby caught whooping cough. Passed it to her first kid. And they both almost died. According to her. Nearly losing her kids made her realize that she was an idiot for not vaccinating them. My mom is anti-vax and I'm reminded every day of how annoying she is because she's also against vaccines for COVID-19 and thinks that the whole rule about wearing face masks is to move America to Islamic rule with women covering their like faces and everything. She's also hugely Islamophobic. And long story short, I hate being home. I wasn't really an anti-vaxxer by today's standard and definition. But back then I did question the validity of it. I used to wear my tinfoil hat back in the Facebook days and delved into some wacko shit like the usual Illuminati, lizard people, hollow moon and other shit. I guess after I grew apart from my friends who were also into all that, I gradually came back to reality and realized how dumb it all is. Edit. Found the dumbass video that my friend showed me when I was 15. Needless to say, I took this at face value and considered myself woke. I realized my reasons to anti-vax were actually rooted in anxiety. Result of childhood trauma. And not because I was against vaccinating. The process started a little over a year ago. I just had my third. And I was homeschooling my eldest. Kindergarten. The initial push to dealing with it was the regret of not being able to enroll my eldest in public school. And my newborn being at risk by having unvaccinated siblings. I took a hard look at my choices and why I hadn't vaccinated my first 2, and every last one was because of fear and guilt. I found a rock star pediatrician who didn't once judge me. And got all my kids caught up. I have 3 fantastic kids that are now fully vaccinated. And I am successfully on the road to recovery, so I can be the best person I can be for my kids. They deserve it. **** edit. Thank you everyone for your amazingly kind words of support, and thank you award givers. I can't express how amazing it was to wake up to this today. Writing this down was somewhat cathartic for me. Being able to share this piece of me has given me a lot of peace. And all of the support is the cherry on top. I am going to share a little bit more to hopefully answer some comment questions. I have a history of long childhood trauma. I don't really want to get into details about it specifically, it would make this edit very long. But basically emotional neglect from my parents. That affected my emotional development from a young age. I did not realize I was suffering from anxiety at all until a year ago. I had been having anxiety attacks and didn't know that's what they were. The anxiety is a direct result of the childhood trauma. Someone commented that the anti-vaccines was a symptom, and yes, it was. I was absolutely riddled with symptoms and triggers. Let me tell you, when anxiety is controlling your life, it will affect nearly every single piece of you. So where vaccines got into all of this? I was immediately put off the path to scheduled vaccinations when my oldest daughter was born. I was told in a rather confrontational way by a recovery nurse they were required to give her a Hep B vaccine by 2 hours old. Or I had to sign a waiver of refusal to release them of liability. This scared the hell out of me and crippled my decision-making process. This never happened to me again with the births of my other two. I don't really know what was going on then, it was almost 8 years ago. And I never actually even went back to that hospital. This whole series of events with my oldest and the hospital experience just gave my anxiety something new to latch on. And it did. Every reason to not vaccinate was something based in fear and nothing more, especially fear of being judged by doctors. That's why I pointed out that after I had my third, I found an absolutely amazing pediatrician, and she truly never once judged me. She was gentle and asked me what I wanted. And respected me as the mother and caregiver of my children. Such a great experience, and that alone helped me make the decision to start vaccinations. Another point I would like to add to answer a comment question is that I did indeed homeschool my oldest in kindergarten because she wasn't vaccinated, and it is required in my state to be enrolled in public school. However, she did get vaccinated in time to enroll in first grade and is now in public school, and man, she deserves it so much. She is so smart and deserves the best education possible. She is the true unsung hero of this story. She was put on an accelerated schedule to catch up on her vaccines and never once complained, and handled it with so much grace that I am in awe of. I have apologized to her that I did not take care of this when she was a baby. And I will definitely be willing to explain this all to her when she is old enough. My other two luckily were still babies when they started vaccinations, so they caught up to the schedule fast. My youngest actually never fell behind, but my middle was 15 months old and had to catch up some. People always show love and kindness to others. Like many of you have shown me in this thread. It really is the simple things that help people who are suffering. And you do not know what debilitating things people are dealing with. Anyone else who suffers with anxiety, you are not alone. And you deserve so much love. Not me, but my Nona. She's always been into oils, healing rocks, potatoes in socks, all that weird shit. When I was sick, she would give me a bath and run her hand right above my skin, from head to toe. 2. Draw out the sickness. When my youngest cousin was born, she practically moved into my aunt's house and went everywhere with them. When she took him to get his shots, my Nona started fussing with the pediatrician and he just talked. All he did was explain shit to her. And she finally understood how batshit she sounded. She still firmly believes that my cat is gonna steal my firstborn's breath. But we're working on it. Edit. I never thought a little story about my Nona would get so much attention. LMAO. For those asking, she would cut a potato into slices and stick a slice in each of my socks when I was sick. In the morning they were supposed to be black, meaning they had drawn out whatever toxins were in my body.